Hello, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the West Hollywood Planning Commission. This is a regularly scheduled meeting. In case anyone needed a reminder, it is Thursday, April 18th. The Pledge of Allegiance. Who would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I am not able to see some of the audience. Mr. Todd Elliott, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I know you thought you had escaped my stare, but...
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. David, could you please do roll call for us?
Good evening. Commissioner Hoopengarner? Commissioner Hoopengarner?
She's here.
Present.
Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Commissioner Buckner?
Here.
Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Elchel?
Here.
Vice Chair Carvalero?
Here.
Chair Jones?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Are we able to move the agenda as is, or do I have any changes?
Motion by Commissioner Erickson, seconded by Commissioner Hoopengarner. And the agenda is approved.
Great, thank you. We also have approval of the minutes from our April 4th, 2019 meeting. Do we have a motion to, oh, wait.
Madam Chair, I believe that I had to recuse myself from one of the items, so I'll be approving it, but just acknowledge that I can't vote on it.
Right, so we would need to, would Commissioner Buckner and Commissioner Outschel need to abstain from approval of the minutes?
No, they can just note that they recused themselves from those items, but they can still vote on that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Moved by Commissioner Bass, seconded by Commissioner Erickson. And the minutes are approved as recorded.
Thank you. Item 6 is public comment. David, do we have any public speakers at this time?
We have no public comment.
All right, moving right along. Item 7 is Director's Report. Director John Kehoe, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Chair and Commissioners. I was hiding behind the sign over there. So just a couple of items to report on that are coming to the City Council, the next council meeting, which is on May 6th, that has interest for the Planning Commissioners. So the condominium project located at 1257 North Sweetser Avenue, that was a 14-unit condo project that the Planning Commission approved, was appealed, and so then that's going to go to the City Council on May 6th. Also, on the May 6th agenda is a sunset-specific plan amendment that the Planning Commission approved, which would change the rear yard setback adjacent to residential from 5 to 10 feet. So that's scheduled for May 6th. We're also scheduled to talk about the dwelling units and the length of how long people need to live in a dwelling unit. That one's scheduled for May 6th. And then another kind of a more of a policy direction discussion that's going to take place is some of the council members asked us to do an analysis of billboards that are located outside of Sunset Boulevard and come back with some options of how we might want to address billboards off of Sunset. So that's an item that's also scheduled for May 6th. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Any questions? You're off the hook. Thank you. Item 8 is items from commissioners. No? You sure? All right. You'll have another opportunity to speak, as you well know. All right, item 9, consent calendar. We have none, so we are going to move right into item 10A, which is our first public hearing this evening. This is 7424 and 7426 Santa Monica Boulevard, and I will turn this over to Adrian Gallo for his presentation.
Good evening, Chair Jones and members of the Commission. I'm Adrian Gallo with the city's current planning division. On the screen is an aerial overview of the subject property, which is located on the south side of Santa Monica Boulevard between Vista Street and Martel Avenue. Currently, the project site contains a one-story commercial building and associated surface parking lot. Santa Monica Boulevard is fronted by commercial uses within the vicinity of the subject site, and multifamily residential uses are located south of the property. The proposal is a request to demolish the existing commercial building and construct a 5-story, 31-unit mixed-use building with 47 parking spaces distributed between the ground floor and a subterranean level. The commercial consists of a 2,000 square foot retail space. The project also includes a vesting tentative tract map that would combine the two lots at 7424 and 7426 Santa Monica Boulevard into one property and subdivide the 31 units into condominiums. The proposed project utilizes a density bonus by providing affordable housing on site and a mixed-use bonus. The CC1 zoning district establishes a 35-foot height limit, and the mixed-use incentive overlay zone permits a height bonus of 10 feet. In addition, because the project provides 5 affordable dwelling units, the project is eligible for a 35% density bonus and 2 concessions. The project is seeking to allow 1 additional story that is 11'6" in height and exclusion of the enclosed common stair area in the FAR calculation. The affordable housing income distribution for the project is 3 very low-income units and 2 moderate-income units. The applicant team, planning staff, and housing staff have reviewed and confirmed these numbers for this project. The affordable units being provided are 1 and 2 bedroom units and exceed the minimum size requirement of 650 square feet. The project was reviewed by the Planning Commission Subcommittee, Planning Commission Design Review Subcommittee. The subcommittee responded positively to the design of the project. At this point, I'd like to ask Gwen Pugh to speak on the project design.
So this is a project that went through a number of iterations and has, as a consequence, I think, become a much better project and much more suitable for its particular environment. It is quite a large building, but it is located on the south side of the street. It's obviously an area that's developing, but being on the south side of the street, it won't negatively impact in any significant way the neighbors due to shadowing and the like. It is a 4-sided building. All elevations have had attention paid to them and are integrated and cohesive in the way that they've been brought together. One of the things that the developer and architect attended to was the ground floor plane, particularly off Santa Monica Boulevard. Initially, the floor-to-floor height was a little low, but is around 14 feet at this point. One of the things that added interest to it was the chevron-type canopy that dipped in towards the middle third, and that allowed the articulation of the commercial and of the residential entry. The residential entry is well emphasized. There was concerns at one time that this might become a home for the homeless, so they pulled forward the doors, but the whole is set back to allow for a wider sidewalk and potential sidewalk activities. The overall design has a little bit of a castellated, in other words, a castle-like look to it with the 3 towers that sit there, but it does definitely break up the skyline, and the 3 upper elements are floating off an intermediate space that allows them to, that disconnects them from the base, but allows them to have their own presence. And there's an effective use of materials through there. And as you can see, as you go around the building, keep going, that there is variation on the sides that is cohesive to the whole. Next one. And you can see this. And so the back of the building also reflects in many ways the elements of the front of the building and is visually as interesting. Each of the units has its own balconies and outdoor space. And in general, I think this is a well-composed building which has very effectively been designed and is appropriate to the neighborhood. Thank you.
The proposed project would develop a 5-story mixed-use building that is in compliance with the goals and provisions of the general plan, in that the project provides a mixed-use housing project with on-site affordable housing, both of which the city incentivizes and encourages. The concessions and incentives are granted for providing a mixed-use project with affordable housing. The project's mix of uses and architectural and urban design elements will enhance the streetscape and improve pedestrian activity along Santa Monica Boulevard. As proposed and as conditioned, the required findings for this project can be made and satisfied. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the application. Before I conclude staff's presentation, staff proposes to amend the following conditions in draft resolution PC 191316. Conditions 3.8, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 12.4, and eliminate condition 411, which should have that before you. Thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you.
Condition 411 is also in the tentative tract map as condition 3.4. It's the same language, so we'll delete it from both resolutions.
You said it was in the tentative tract map, it's 3.4?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank
The
you.
same language as 411 in the first resolution.
Thank you, and thank you, Adrian. Does anyone on commission have questions for staff at this time? Go ahead, Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Yes. Thank you. Oh, thank you. And I'm sorry, Adrian, I've been out of town all week, so I wasn't able to get my questions in early. Part of this question is for legal, and part of it's for you. And it relates to the green points. Now, I noticed in the staff report that you say that there's 90 green points, but they're not asking for any concessions.
Correct.
My question for legal is there any ministerial changes that could be requested post any approval based upon those 90 points?
You mean, could they get any sort of incentive at the staff level? No, that would have to come before you to get an incentive.
Okay, because
some
I'd like
kind.
to make that pretty clear, because there's a number of things in those green points that are not correct. In particular, there's 2 bonus points for EV stations that staff even has in the resolutions under 9.3 as a requirement under code. So they're required under code, they can't be included in green bonus points. So there's a couple of things like that. There's no shading devices on the south and west side. There's 2 or 3 things that are problematic in achieving those 90 points. I just want to make it very clear that there's nothing ministerial that can happen because this document says there's 90 points.
Yeah, I do not believe that there are any incentives that can be granted at the staff level.
Okay, and do we need to put that in, to clarify that in the resolutions, given that those 90 points are in the resolutions?
I mean, you could say in the condition about the green points, you could clarify that no incentives are being requested, and then it's part of your condition. The same way we say if an incentive is being asked for, there's a parking reduction.
Point of information, Madam Chair.
Sure, or we can wait until, what I'd like,
So when we talk about what green points are allowed and not allowed, we have to talk about the green point system that was in effect when the tract map was deemed complete,
Sure.
not subsequent. So that may have changed.
what I'd like to do to avoid kind of crosstalk is just, we can address this, you can address this in your presentation and/or in your rebuttal, but I just want to get through questions because we're not in deliberation yet, but thank you. Any other questions for staff at this time?
Yes. Sorry, 1 second here. Where is the lid compliance in this? I couldn't find anything in the diagrams.
Yeah. Condition 7.7,
In the plans.
lid compliance. That comes during building safety plan check. LID? Yeah, that's a requirement for plan check after entitlements are received.
Okay. I just couldn't see any place to put it.
We can ask the architect where they anticipate that.
That was my concern.
Okay.
And the 2,000 square feet of common open space required for a project of this size,
Yes.
where is it?
They're asking to transfer it to the private open space.
Is
In-
that in the condition somewhere?
That's in the resolution, sorry, in the
I
staff
didn't
report.
see it in the staff report, that's why I was.
Yeah, you see it in page 10 of 12, the bullet point at the very bottom of the table.
Oh, it's just in the table, okay, thank you.
Sure.
And last, that was it, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bass?
I'd just like to clarify, I'd like to clarify one thing. In the memo you gave us modifying some of the conditions tonight, 3.8, it says in the second line, as existed on November 19th, 2019.
Yes.
So I think the date's wrong.
2018, sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions for staff at this time? No? All right. Well, with that, we will move into the applicant's presentation. You will have 10 minutes to present. And again, if you're in the audience and have come in kind of after the beginning of the meeting, if you need to speak or want to speak on this item, you would need to issue a speaker slip with Secretary David Gillig up here. Also, when you come up to the dais, please state your name and city of residence. Thanks.
Mr. Gillig, will you start the timer? Good evening. I'm Todd Elliott of Truman and Elliott, practicing law at 626 Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. Our design team is here, Kip Dixon from Adept Architects, and our landscape designer, Amy Corin of Corin Randolph. It's been noted that we twice went to design review and were requested to look at some revisions, and we're thankful for Mr. Pugh's input and believe we have a better project. Kip Dixon is the architect for the project, and he's going to present a brief slideshow of the project, and then I will jump back in and provide some more information and, of course, answer any questions that you may have. I hope you're enjoying this evening, being creators of architecturally quality buildings in West Hollywood.
Kip Dixon. I live in Whittier, California, and I'm the architect of record for this project, representing the team. And I believe you folks are probably looking at the same in terms of what's up there. The principal thing that I want to talk about is our approach to this building, and that when we approached this, one of the things that we noticed in the upper left-hand corner is a number of buildings that were being built along Santa Monica Boulevard that were correct urban buildings in the sense that they brought the pedestrian front out to the street, and that they hugged the edges and kept the block, the integrity of the block. One of the things that we did notice, however, is, as you can see in the hatch, is that some of these buildings are producing blank walls. And there was some concern on our team in terms of driving up and down the boulevard as to how long these blank walls would be there and would be visible. Our team actually looked at it approaching adjacent property owners and looked at acquiring in terms of making this larger. And one of the things that we decided to do when we were unsuccessful with that, in the middle up at the top, is to pull the building back 10 feet on all sides from the edges of the property. And the goal there was to incorporate windows onto all sides of the building so as we wouldn't leave a blank concrete block wall on the two sides of this building as we wait for the context to kind of grow into it. The other strategy is that Gwen talked about kind of the castellated quality of the building, is that if you look at the third diagram in the upper right-hand corner, one of the things that we noticed is that along the boulevard, that each one of the separate individual buildings is rather narrow in terms of kind of really responding to the individual property dimensions. Further, when you look at the context model down below, the context is one that is changing from much smaller footprints that are a single family, ranging on up to larger developments, and obviously on down the boulevard at the, I believe, the Avalon, you have a huge project at that size. Our goal was just to break up the project in a sense, if you look at the upper right-hand corner, to break this into a series of modules so that the building could be understood and comprehended as 3 separate buildings on the front and 3 separate buildings on the back. As we broke that up, we used that as the opportunity in the lower left-hand side in terms of bringing in the required plus the additional communal open space into the project and provided at each one of the units. And then finally on up to open space on the roof for the top units. And then landscape was brought into each one of those pieces. Very simple underground floor plan in the upper left-hand corner where all of the residential parking exists with a ramp down. The ground floor plan with commercial space out in the front and parking for the commercial uses. Floor plans in terms of looking at what happens on the ground floor. One of the things that we tried to do is we introduced a unit type that actually stretches deep with 1-bedroom units at the center, but 2-bedroom units, and I believe that Todd will speak to this as well. We tried to incorporate units at this podium level, which actually have a den, and that den is intended to be used potentially as a home office space in terms of the people at that point. Each one of these is set up so that there is not only pedestrian access that comes in from the street, but on both sides of the property, there's access in terms of anybody that would be a guest or a customer that might come in and visit one of these to leave. Carries on up through the top, and one of the things that we tried to do was break the building a little bit at the middle in terms of breaking it not only in the 3 pieces, but then the front and the back piece. And we have units that are kind of positioned on those 2 sides and step the building further back again beyond that so that those are some 18 feet back from the property line, understanding that another building could in fact be built right to the property line in the future. The sections basically are fairly straightforward in terms of showing that we're coming down 1 level. The back of the site is about 30 inches lower than the front of the site, so the amount of excavation all the way through was not as significant as it would have been otherwise. Just a quick comment in terms of the material. We've been through this with the subcommittee, and if you look at what is the images that are on the slides, we came back to the subcommittee with a discussion in terms of the color palette that we were looking at in this pixelation, and that was the original, and you can see down below we have the alternative that we presented that was favored not only by us but by the subcommittee in terms of a little brighter color that went into this. The remainder of the facade is clad with aluminum windows that are wood on the inside and a full aluminum on the outside, metal panel. We do have a limited amount of glass railing, and one of the discussions was the design of the rails at the balcony, and we worked with Gwen on this in that we wanted something that was transparent, but we also didn't want to expose everybody's stuff that was out on the balcony. So we have a combination of the horizontal banding that is there as well as a perforated metal screen behind that in terms of beginning to knock some of that visibility down. Amy, talk about the landscape.
Thank you, Kip. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be here. Hopefully you can see in the sheet in your package and on the slide that I'm Amy Korn with Korn Randolph Landscape Architects. that our approach to the landscape design is really in keeping with what we consider that the architect has done to embrace the contextual nature of the urban neighborhood. Along Santa Monica Boulevard, which you can see in the slide, on the left-hand portion of the slide, that there is a zone of landscape that is existing with a few canopy trees of Chinese elm. Now, we understand as a design team that there is a future change happening with the proposed street trees and the ordinance, and perhaps more of a selective canopy that is responsive to today's conditions and future conditions. But what we're trying to embrace as a team here is to understand that there's a median with landscape. We want to respond to that and create at least this fabric that you can see in the parkway that is quite simple, and the species that represent that palette are the center image. It's a blue oat grass, so we're kind of cooling off, and we have a warm textured grass as well. Low maintenance, drought tolerant is the nature of the entire palette. Again, urban in nature, we don't quite see large masses of landscape, but what the architect has allowed us to bring landscaping in at the edges of the moments of architecture where it's important, where we want to bring green down and embrace landscape at the edges. So the building is framed by these trays, if you will. They're elevated, but cascading plants would be part of that fabric. The upper left-hand image within the set of three, kind of like the architectural elevation, we have Australian plants represented here that will look good year-round. Sometimes we're challenged by our natives, but we want to introduce color as well. We have a species called leucadendron that grows upright. It's conducive to the drainage that we have in these planters, the heat and the conditions, and it also adds color and texture and a verticality up against that architecture. So I know that we're limited in time, and I want to give others an opportunity, but we're looking forward to responding to your questions, any questions that you would have about the landscape in addition. Thank you.
So just a few further notes.
I'm sorry, how much time is left?
19 seconds.
Thank you.
Are there any public speakers?
Yes.
May I ask how many?
There are 2 right now. He asked if there were any public speakers. There are 2 as of right now.
Okay, why don't I just do what I was going to say along with my rebuttal?
Okay, if you're okay with that, that's fine.
Yeah, I think I can.
Okay, that's fine. And again, I'd ask that we hold questions at this time, and we'll ask questions after we've closed the public hearing, if that's all right. Thank you very much. So we're going to move into public comment now. Actually, I should have done this before. We need to do disclosures. We should have done that after the staff report. That's my bad. Do we have any disclosures at this time?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did have an opportunity to talk on the phone with the applicant's representative, Todd Elliott, and we discussed matters that are contained in the staff report.
Thank you.
My disclosure is the same.
I had a conversation with Todd Elliott, and we discussed the health of a mutual friend.
I had a phone conversation with Todd Elliott, the applicant's representative, and we discussed items contained in the staff report.
My disclosure is the same.
I met with the applicant's representative, and I walked the area, and I spoke to some neighbors in the surrounding community.
I visited the site.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we got those in before public comment. So we'll move into public comment now. Anson Snyder, followed by Jason W. And again, I'm just reading these as they appear on the screen, so if I've made an egregious error as regards the pronunciation of your name, please let me know.
City Planning Commission, good evening. I'm Anson Snyder. I am a resident on Vista Street. I will read my comments. I participated in the January 2019 Design Review Board discussion on massing the relationship between the commercial and residential components and materials. Neighbors with the commission or committee members provided input meant to improve or strengthen the building's design. Although the subject is another development application for the city or review board to consider to the neighborhood, this proposal continues to implement our vision of responsible transit-oriented development along our commercial corridors. Moreover, this project supports our Gardner Vista commercial node that promotes positive neighborhood interaction. The recommended concessions of height and FAR common stair exclusion are reasonable for the proposed development, as the subject offers a well-organized articulation of use and integration of the components, including housing, 5 affordable, transit options, and open space. My neighbors are vested with our city commission and staff to deliver development that is in conformance with our West Hollywood vision and our Gardner Vista commercial node. Since this proposed development was initially previewed, the application has improved. I thank many of the commission members for their input. I support this development application, the staff demolition permit, and vesting map resolutions as presented, and ask the City Planning Commission to grant its approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason W. And again, please state your name and city of residence.
Sure. Jason Wong, Inglewood. I'm the owner of the Fat Burger on the corner, basically two buildings over. I have concerns about the parking situation and the fact that the access is all through the alley. The alley already is a mess. It's basically one way, and I can see people using our easement because between my building and the neighboring one, because of the way Gardner and Vista juts out at the Fat Burger, to cut in through there. There's no good way out on Martel. So I think it's going to create a traffic nightmare for the surrounding businesses. So,
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will move into the applicant's rebuttal now. You will have 5 minutes. And then just a note I'd like to give, we'll do questions, and then I'd like to take a quick break so that we can all take a look at the model.
Thank you. Good evening again, Todd Elliott. The only rebuttal comment that I have is we're happy to talk to the owner of Fat Burger and talk to him about his options for making sure he secures his own parking. I used to live at 1041 North Martel, so I'm intimately familiar with the alley, and I don't agree or think there's substantial evidence to state that use of the alley would be a nightmare. Rather, I think because the developer has chosen to set back the back of the building 5 feet, that's a wise choice and prevents that from being a difficult situation. My notes that I further wanted to bring up is that with all good designs, the applicant team looked at the datum line of the neighborhood to bring forth the project. The staff report notes that the block is mostly 1 or 2 stories. We really are wondering what the commission or the staff is thinking is context for future projects. We tend to think the context is Vista to La Brea, approximately 10-block stretch that's less than half a mile, or even a quarter mile would include the 8-story Avalon building. So that's what we think the context is. I think you hear every day that people are frustrated that they can't find housing, they can't get into the housing market. These smaller condominium units will command more reasonable prices for first-time buyers to enter the market. And Mr. Dixon, the architect, mentioned that we do have 4 units on the second level that do come with dens and an extra bathroom, so that people who are living and working at home could have an occasional client come to their office, not enter their living space, yet at the same time have a mortgage payment and a rent payment that's all in one. And that can be a very valuable type of purchase for younger people, for people trying to own property and not just rent property, get into the housing market. The concessions that we're asking for, although we are not required to do so, I just wanted to illuminate for you that the additional 11 and a half feet, the city normally allows a 10-foot or recommends a 10-foot for a floor. However, state law does not preclude asking for what you need to achieve an actual cost reduction. In this case, the height actually goes to the ground floor, which is 12 feet 10 inches. Space for commercial ground floor space, and having been a commercial real estate broker for over 30 years, it's critical that you have at least a 12-foot height space in order to get a certain rental rate. The urban designer actually recommended 15, and I felt in fairness and conscience that we could still make a reasonable return at 12 feet 10. The second ask, we have asked not to have the enclosed stairways as part of the FAR, and this is actually to put a higher form of fire retardant material in these areas, and that makes this building a safer building and a more valuable building to the buyers, which goes to the sales price, which offsets the cost of building the affordable units. So in conclusion, I think the project is a stately addition to the neighborhood. It's in substantial compliance with the zoning code and the general plan, and presents no threat to health or safety, and therefore we ask your approval of the development permit, the demolition permit, and the vesting tract map for the project. And if there's any discussion about the green points, we're happy to address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elliott. Do we have any questions for the applicant team at this time? Really? No one has any questions for the applicant? All right, Commissioner Altschul.
It's your position that there are 90 green points?
It is.
Has it been discussed with you or told you what the opposite position is?
No, that's not been raised at all until this evening.
Warren, who makes the final determination as to the amount of the green points?
I believe the final determination happens during the plan check process when the more detailed plan is presented to the city. There's a checklist that's submitted with the application, and that is reviewed just like any other entitlement application to come up with the number that's presented to you tonight. It's verified at the plan check stage.
So that's done after the entitlement is given? Mm-hmm. So that if there is a discrepancy or a disagreement prior to that time, that might affect the entitlement or the concessions?
Well, we include a condition that says that they have to meet the level that they've presented to you tonight, and sometimes there could be some changes in the ultimate list of green elements that end up in the project. There is some flexibility, but they have to meet that requirement, and I don't believe this project is taking an incentive for getting to 90 points. So you're not giving them anything in exchange for getting to that level.
You make changes and they don't meet that requirement, then it is sent back here?
It's required under your resolution of approval that they get to that level.
Thank you.
Point of information, I would think that whether or not it would be sent back here is a determination of whether it's a minor or a major change.
The project has to meet the requirements that's in the resolution.
Understood.
That's,
But if there's a request
Baseline.
for an incentive, is that a minor or a major change?
a request for a green building incentive after the fact? I think staff would consider that major. I don't think they would grant an incentive to the project that wasn't part of the original approval.
We're not granting an incentive based
There's
off
no,
the green
there's no
points.
incentive proposed
Great.
tonight.
And from what I'm reading, although staff has plan checked it and gotten to 90 green points, the mandatory points for compliance is 60. So unless one of my commissioners has found 30 green points somewhere that would bring it below the 60 amount, it's almost a moot point, correct? I know it's not the point, but I'm talking about straight up numbers. If someone has a few points that aren't meeting or that need to be negotiated, that's one thing. But as long as it's within compliance with the required amount of green points needed, AKA 60, and they're not even asking for an incentive, so I don't even know why I'm going there. But I'm just saying that there's multiple prongs to that argument that we could come at this from.
Yes, but if they promise you a 90-point project, it's going to be conditioned
that's
to be
what
a
I'm
90-point
saying.
project.
So I'm saying if we're actually going to have that discussion, then we should have that discussion.
Changing the elements of how you get to 90 and asking for an incentive are two separate things.
Correct.
I think there is some flexibility that if your list changes on how you get to 90, that might be done, that's going to be verified by staff. Asking for a new green building incentive that wasn't part of your planning entitlement package, staff would consider that a major change and bring that. That's something extra, different, that wasn't considered tonight.
I think there's a code section that defines minor and major change.
Yes, there is.
And I don't believe that if you wanted certain incentives, they could be considered a major change.
For asking for, I'll tell you what the incentives are. The incentives that are available are 100% of required common open space provided on the roof, private open space transferred and provided as common open space, the setbacks using to satisfy open space being changed, restaurant tenants in the commercial space have a different parking ratio, which may actually be moot now that we've changed our commercial parking, so that may not even be available.
Is that moot?
I don't know the parking ratio for restaurants.
Well, I'd ask the planner.
Is it new or moot?
Moot.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we don't let kind of the meeting get off the rails too much here. I'd like to, if you want to have a conversation with staff about this, that can happen, but I'd like to make sure that all of Commission's questions are answered before we move in. If there are any requests, I mean, I would even go so far as to say that we could, I don't know if this is legal, but condition it to the point that if there are any concessions requested after the fact, a green building concession required, that we would just write it into the resolution that we require that it come back to us, so that there is no,
And where's the nexus for that?
I mean, look, I'm not here to have a legal argument about it. I just want to say that if there is something here, we are very adamant about not allowing projects to change significantly after the public and after we have had an opportunity to see them.
And I'm just very adamant that the commission follow the law.
So, question for staff?
I'd like to limit it again to questions for the applicant team at this time, and then we can close the public hearing and move into deliberation. And again, I'd like to give us a chance to see the model. Any other questions for the applicant team at this time? No? Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing now, and we're going to go down and take a look at the model. Again, we're not allowed to interact with each other or with the public at this time, so just know that we're not allowed to speak to anyone. And David, I think we can take 5 minutes to do this. Thank you. Okay, we are going to resume the meeting, and we have moved into deliberation. The public hearing is now closed. I can reopen it if we have additional questions of the applicant. So who would like to go first? Commissioner Buckner?
I just have a quick question. With regard to the concessions and the findings that we must make, how do we know, looking at item number 1, that the first finding, that the concession does not result in identifiable and actual cost reductions to provide for the affordable housing? How do we know? How do I know that that's accurate and that they can't do that?
I think that's a challenge with the density bonus program. It is, you know, the city would have the burden of making that finding and showing that there's no nexus to cost reductions in order to deny a concession. I will say that we tried to improve that when we amended the Chapter 1922, which doesn't apply to this project. I believe it was deemed complete before we made those changes. But now, as part of an application, when somebody applies for something off menu, we ask for a narrative, a description, explain that to us. So moving forward, we're asking for more information to that effect to help you make that determination. But it is a little bit tricky, and Mr. Elliott explained his basis for how these concessions do have some nexus to cost reductions and paying the developer back for providing the affordable housing units. And that's the evidence that's before you.
I'm sure that they are, but we're sort of taking it on blind faith.
It's something that we've struggled with a long time. Can you ask for construction numbers? Can you ask for all these things? And we've definitely struggled with that. But at the moment, it's sort of a narrative explanation as to how it reduces costs and helps pay the developer back. That's what the density bonus program is supposed to be for.
Just confused.
I know, it's
Okay.
challenging.
Challenging. So in order to do that, the city would have to contest it.
The city would have to come up with the evidence to support that finding in order to deny a
And we just don't do
concession.
that. We just sort of accept the developer's representation that that's a fact.
Yes, because in the greater scheme of these projects, they're providing housing, and in exchange for that, they get the bonuses and the incentives. So they meet the city's goals, and that's how
Okay. Thank you.
implemented.
Commissioner Hoopengarner?
I have a question for staff about the nature of these dens on pages, let's see, I think it's on the second and third floors. Page A105 and 106. So these are called out as 1-bedroom, 2-bathroom units. But they effectively have a second bedroom that's just missing a wall. Now, this obviously impacts the parking requirements because it's a 1-bedroom. What are the restrictions on turning that den into a bedroom?
They wouldn't be able to unless they found the parking for it.
And if the homeowner that purchased it subsequently turns it into a bedroom?
They would come in for permits, and we would realize that it's a 1-bedroom unit as part of the approval. If they did the work without permits, we wouldn't know that's the case.
Okay. Be interested to see that. Thank you.
Commissioner Bass?
Yeah, I generally support this project. I think it is the type of project that we need to see on the east side. It brings us housing. I'm impressed with the number of low-income units. I really have very few critical comments to make here. The two suggestions that I would make is I'm interested in seeing where the rest of the commission comes down on these 90 green points. And I'm also interested in, as just a good faith measure, if we could, it came up tonight when we were talking about Fatburger, it occurred to me that both of the next two businesses are these small businesses, Fatburger and the Thai Place. Just some sort of construction mitigation that takes into account their dining hours, because if we're digging in the dirt at the exact same time people are eating on the patio, we could put those businesses out of business. I would like to, I don't know how we condition that, maybe just require that the developer meet with the director and specifically address that in the construction mitigation plans. Maybe bring in those restaurant owners to kind of figure out what their peak hours are. I'm seeing Mr. Elliott shake his head yes, so I think that would be a friendly sort of condition, just to the director's satisfaction. But I don't want to hurt those small businesses during construction, but otherwise I would support this project.
Commissioner Erickson? Oh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am also in support of the project. I live on the east side. I live up on Fountain Avenue, and I am a frequenter of Galanga Thai and Fatburger. I'm really glad to finally find the owner of Fatburger, Jason Wong. You're welcome for supporting your business for a number of years. However, you know, I do share Commissioner Bass's concerns, just making sure that the two small businesses aren't impacted, but the public comment regarding the parking at Fatburger and Galanga, I mean, the parking there is a mess already, because there's actually two more businesses directly right behind those individual businesses. There's a massage place and then another business right behind that as well. So there's like, I think roughly 10 to 12 spaces there that are supposed to work for 4 businesses. That just doesn't happen. And I think the problem with the parking is just evident by the nature of the businesses themselves. And I commend the developer and the project, the applicant, for wanting to work with that and solve a larger problem that actually isn't their problem. So I think that's something that if you're willing to do, great. But it's also the other businesses' problems and concerns to fix their own parking situation, which is it's not very good. So I'm getting on a point where it has nothing to do with this project, so I'm bringing myself back in. I do want to commend the ways in which we're providing more affordable housing, especially housing here. Looking at the designs of the actual units from the first level, I hear what my fellow commissioner is saying regarding the den, but living in a building where I cannot actually get a parking permit because I have parking, I know what that process is like, and people have been denied. So I understand the process works, and I've seen it actually in action. So I'm not too concerned about the den being turned in, because of the parking regulations that the city has already in place are quite stringent. Additionally, I would like to say that there is no housing in this area, so we're taking actually 2 businesses that aren't really offering anything, combining the land, we're adding housing. I think starter homes, places for people to actually invest and get in the housing market, as well as providing the amount of housing that we continually need to address in the city of Los Angeles, as well as the city of West Hollywood, are great, and I commend them for doing that, and their emphasis on the very low affordable housing is commendable. I'm a big fan of the landscaping. I think there's been some care put behind it, and I agree with how the plan has worked out, and I find it to be very visually appeasing. Also, in addition, that the connections to metro and transit here, I think, are something that really I want to think about larger and commend the applicant on, because of the ways in which the 4 and the 704 combine right there, and how you can get on rapid transit, can take you to Santa Monica, downtown Los Angeles, and so being one step outside of being able to get on a bus or walking somewhere, and not having to get in your car, is something that I think we all need to start thinking about and looking at as developments come before us, and whether or not the city gets any type of access to metro or a train in my natural or unnatural life is yet to be seen. However, I think that we need to start looking at these massive transit corridors where housing is actually needed. I too agree that when you look down the block, you see very large high developments, and so the height for the building overall doesn't concern me. When you have the Avalon, and I think it is, as in the staff report pointed out, the ways in which the east side along this Santa Monica corridor is going to be moving forward in the future. I think that a lot of housing will be coming like this, and it is something that we're going to have to take into consideration where there is no housing yet. And then I think that sums up my comments. I am very supportive of this project, and although I'm not on the design review advisory board or whatever that would be, I think it's actually architecturally very pleasing. I think it brings something to the neighborhood that I don't see there right now. Having walked and be in that area quite a lot, when I go home on the weeknights or on the weekends, I don't like to get in my car, so I walk everywhere. To Fatburger, or to the Thai food place, or to Target or Trader Joe's, and I see a space that is very not pleasing to the eye, and I see something that I actually think will fit in nicely in 2, 3, 4 years down the road as more items like this, or more redevelopment, or how we look at our neighborhood, and it starts to change. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Yes, I'm inclined to support this project. There are some concerns I have, but I think that I would agree with Mr. Pugh on his analysis of the design. In fact, I would like to suggest to my fellow commissioners that we perhaps add a condition that reflects the importance of that design, and such that, for example, that canopy, should any modifications be made to it, that that would have to come back to this commission, because it is an important element of the design. The castellation, et cetera, are important design elements, and should that visually change, that wouldn't be what was presented to the public and what we approved. And the reason I bring this up is because this precise issue came up at the Millennium, where a swoop awning got leveled out after the fact. And that awning was an important design element, and it disappeared. So I feel that it's an important component of the design, and I think it's important enough that we put it in writing, and that the elements that were identified by the design committee, our urban design analysis, are in fact called out, and to Mr. Kehoe's point, that if it's in writing, then they have something that they can enforce. So they don't have to go back and look at the videotape or look at minutes. It's in the conditions. So that would be one of my recommendations. On the point of the green points, I do think it is very important that if we're going to approve something for 90 points, then the 90 points should be met. And should any requests or incentives be made, that would require a return to this body. And those would be my requested amendments to the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Altschul?
And also with Commissioner Hoopengarner's request for a couple of amendments.
Thank you. Commissioner Caballero?
I'm generally in support of the project. I think this is a very thoughtful project that's conceptually clear and responds to its context in a meaningful way. I'd like to kind of use this project as an example of where we want our projects to go in the future. We have so many projects that come through that don't have multiple elevations articulated in the way and the complexity that this project does, and I think it sets a good example. It's a solid project. I agree that the height is not an issue for me. We have had projects come through design review which are equal height in the same area. They haven't come to planning commission, but I think this area will transition into this general height density and type of projects that we'll see on Santa Monica Boulevard. I like the variety of units. I've been support of smaller micro units, and this is headed in that direction. And I like the possibility that it does introduce, and I hope they will be more affordable to people who can't afford a lot of the condos that are currently being built in our building. And yeah, I'm in support of the project.
Thank you. I'll just give my comments. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I don't really have a lot to add. I do agree with our other commissioners. I do think this is a really nice project, and I think it's size is fine in that area. And I think I also agree that this could be a model of design for future projects that are mixed projects in that area. I think it's well thought out, and I know that the architect and the developer were responsive to suggestions that were made by design review. And so I'm prepared to support it.
Thank you.
I don't have any objection, though, to condition that this is main design element in the front part of the building. That, I mean, it is a change in that would be a major change, and they'd have to come back anyway, but I don't have any objection to putting it in the...
Thank you. And apologies, I didn't want to speak out of turn. I do usually try to go last. So I don't have a ton else to add. I do encourage the applicant to have a conversation with the owner of Fatburger. Mr. Wong, I do want to acknowledge you coming out this evening. We do care about small business in West Hollywood. We know that when applicants have conversations with neighbors, that it makes for better construction and better projects. I don't know that I have any specific recommendations as regards a solution. I will leave it to the people who are managing those respective properties to, have a conversation about that. But I'm hopeful that I want to encourage dialogue because I do feel that it makes for better projects, and we see that here pretty regularly. I also am generally in support of the project. I will say that while not as spicy, it is usually more fun and easy to preside over public hearings that are without tons of controversy. So thank you for what it sounds like, making it pretty easy for us. I don't have any general objections. I am aligned with Commissioner Hoopengarner's requests for conditioning such that this canopy feature be maintained, and also just to state, read it into the record, that the available green building incentives would alter the design of the project significantly enough that it would constitute a major amendment and require that the project come back to Planning Commission. So whether or not that is implied, or if we need to write it into the condition, I would ask that that be added, and I do want to state that for the record. And at this time, it looks like we have a motion. Commissioner Hoopengarner, did you made the motion? Do you want to read it, or City Attorney?
I'd like to move to approve the staff report with the conditions I previously mentioned, in particular that the design elements identified by Mr. Pugh, in particular the castellation and the canopy, would be, any changes to those would be considered deemed returnable, whatever the appropriate language is in terms of must come back, okay? I'll leave it to the lawyers for the right words.
So can we tackle that one first? Mm-hmm. Okay, so condition 9.11, we could add a subdivision F that says any changes to the castellation or the canopy on the front of the building shall be reviewed by the Planning Commission.
I would just say the front elevation.
Yeah, it might be a little bit too broad.
I mean, it's all of, as Commissioner Caballero called out, it is all of that articulation that we are, finding to be of particular merit. Some might even call it exemplary.
Dare you use that word?
Let's not do that tonight.
Well, why don't we use the word articulation? Any
It's
changes?
an exemplar of what we would like to see.
Any change? Yeah. Yeah.
That's the whole point of
Noted.
exemplary, is it's an exemplar.
So could we say any changes to the articulation, what's the word? Castellation and canopy on the front of the building shall be reviewed by the Planning Commission? Okay, so that's the first part. I'll let you continue your motion.
The second part is 90 points is 90 points is 90 points.
No, I don't actually
Already
think-
conditioned to meet the 90 points.
Right, the 90 points is going to be achievable in any number of ways. And is malleable, as I understand. As long as they meet the 90-point threshold, it's fine, and that is required in plan check regardless of how what might condition it here, because it's already included in the resolution. What it sounds like to me is the condition that we are making is such that if the applicant requests a concession
incentive, yeah.
based on or an incentive based on the green building point threshold that they have met, that it would need to come back to us.
Right, and so to respond to Mr. Elliott's concerns, one of the findings for amendments to a project is whether or not the change would create a significant change to the project design. So what I think I'm hearing the commission say is those available green building incentives that I read from the code before are significant design changes that would require coming back to the commission.
Correct.
Okay, so condition 9.7 is about the green building points, so we could add language at the end that says essentially what I just stated, that the available green building incentives would significantly change the design of the building, and any subsequent requested incentives would need to be approved by the Planning Commission.
Yes, thank you.
Anything else to read? And the changes that Adrian read into the record at the beginning of the hearing?
Yes. And didn't you, Adam?
I would just like to condition that the conversation at least happen to the director's satisfaction for a construction mitigation plan addressing the neighboring businesses.
Okay, so I started to jot something down about that, but maybe we could talk about it a second. We could add a new condition 6.16 that says the applicant shall provide proof to the Director of Planning and Development Services that it has met with the commercial businesses that share the alley to discuss construction management and parking operations. I need you to help me finish that.
I would like to suggest, based on what Adam said, is his point was more to the fact of actually
Aligning with business hours.
Yeah, that if you're going to be doing demolition, if you're going to be doing excavation, that those hours be truncated to not interfere with the dining hours.
I recognize that they're not always going to be able to avoid those hours, but at least if in a construction mitigation plan, they could address how they were minimizing that impact, I believe that would satisfy my request, because construction always is going to be a problem. But I want them just to actually address it.
Madam Chair, please don't create a condition that we can't satisfy by saying they must meet and then they refuse to meet with us.
I agree.
I thought the condition was about the meeting and having the conversation.
Right.
As long as we can show proof that if somebody won't meet with us, we can't prove
I don't
that
feel
we've met.
comfortable adding a condition to that level. I think we get into a situation that I just think we're going down a road that we might not go down to. I feel like the applicant has heard us, and I feel like they will knowing the history of the applicant, I have full faith and confidence that they will meet with the businesses. And also, I then share an additional concern is that the other businesses could bring up issues that, I mean, you talked something like very broad, right? So if we're going to get there, I would want to be very specific, because the other businesses could say all of a sudden parking, or I just think we're going down a road that we don't need to go down. And I just don't think we need to condition it.
I would say that my motion would include language to the effect that the director would work with the applicant and the local businesses to mitigate disruption of those businesses, especially during their dining hours.
I think that satisfies.
Reversing that the businesses work with the director.
Excuse me?
Would you consider reversing that language, so putting it so that the businesses work with the director?
Sure.
Dining hours.
What I want to get to is that
That burger's open till 2 a.m.
the director feels that's been addressed. That's all I really care about.
Okay, Commissioner Hoopen Gardner just said it really well. a sec, can you repeat what you just said, please?
That the director, and you can reverse the order, but that the three parties, the director, the applicant, and the neighboring businesses, work to minimize the impacts during the dining hours of the local businesses. And knowing full well that if you've got dining there all 24 hours a day, that's not possible. But during the primary business hours, primary dining hours, whatever works to the director's satisfaction.
Can't do that.
I mean,
Well, what are primary dining hours?
You know,
What?
What are primary dining hours? If they're open for lunch and they're open for dinner, I mean, they can't stop construction in the middle of the day.
I just want to note, it sounds like, if I'm reading the room correctly, that there is not a general
Consensus.
opposition to this on the part of the applicant. So I think if we leave it to be broad enough, I think we could move forward with Commissioner Hooper and Garner's.
Can't we
condition.
just say, the planning commission would like the applicant to meet with the surrounding businesses and present whatever they came up with to the director, period?
Well, I think the
Whether or
issue
not
with that
that's
is
approval or
that,
not, because the other businesses could, I mean, I'm not trying to place blame or preemptively like think about what they could do, but we're going down a road here that I think is something that we don't need to condition. And I think we're getting, it's like when we look at, I think we had a conversation several meetings ago about like the number of people could have on a roof and putting it in the CCNRs and how that would just create a crazy math solution that we don't need to. I don't think we need to condition this, and I'm not supportive of this condition.
Commissioner, I just
And
want to point out, our
wasn't it
standard
about-
mitigation condition does require us to look at all of these different things for other small businesses, outdoor dining, apartment windows, and so that should be addressed. Staff has heard you, and so we're aware of that, and when they do go to work on this with our code enforcement division, we can ensure that that's addressed.
okay, well, given that, would Commissioner Bass and Commissioner Hooper and Garner be comfortable with leaving the language for that portion as is and only including the two other
I'm
conditions?
comfortable with it as long as it's now very clear to everybody that it's important.
My ultimate goal as the director and the staff feel that that those concerns have been heard and addressed in the mitigation plan, and that everything is done within reason to support these small businesses. And I believe that we've beat a dead horse, and that's been accomplished now. Thank you.
And is it staff and the city attorney's position that the current language, the existing language in the resolution does support that? Okay,
Yeah, the construction mitigation plan is very extensive.
okay. Are we ready to call the question?
And the motion passes unanimously. The resolutions the Planning Commission just approved memorializes the Commission's final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees.
Thank you. And again, we're going to move right into our next item, so if you just make sure you keep your voices down as you move out of the auditorium. Item 10B is a general plan amendment hazard mitigation plan, and I'm going to turn this over to Tara Warden, our assistant planner, for her staff presentation as soon as she has a chance to sit down and get settled.
Would the commissioners like a presentation on this item?
If we don't feel that we need a presentation, I'm fine to skip that. David, do we have any public speakers on this item?
We have no public speakers.
Great. Do we have any questions for staff about this item? No? All right, I hate to keep asking these leading questions, but okay.
Doing a great job.
All right, I just want to make sure everybody feels heard. All right, well, with that, I will close the public hearing, and we can move into deliberation, and it sounds like there's not going to be a lot. So, to that end, do we have a motion on the floor? It sounds like we do. Commissioner Erickson, would you like to read your motion?
I would like to move that we approve staff's recommendation.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have a second by Commissioner Bass, and it looks like we can call the question.
And the motion passes unanimously. There's no appeal. This is going directly to City Council for their work.
Thanks for all your hard work, ladies.
Yeah, thank you.
I was really looking forward to grilling you, Tara. but
think-
I thought I'd let you.
I don't think we've ever approved an item before the previous applicant has had an opportunity to exit the auditorium. All right, moving into item, again, if you'd like to have a conversation, if you could please move into the foyer area, we'd appreciate it. We're not quite done here yet. Item 11 is new business, there is none. Item 12, unfinished business, there is none. Item 13, excluded consent calendar, there is none. Item 14A, items from staff, planning managers update.
Nothing tonight.
Nothing tonight, thank you, David. Item 15 is public comment. David, do we have any public speakers?
We have no public speakers.
All right, great, thank you. Item 16, items from commissioners. I do have one item, actually. I just want to let everyone know, I hate to disappoint you, that there is a chance that I will have to miss the next meeting. I may have to be in our nation's capital. It also happens to fall on an important date in my life. It's completely unrelated, but I should have travel plans figured out by tomorrow or Monday, so I will let our secretary know, and my trusty vice chair, Mr. Caviero, you will know as soon as possible, but I did just want to give a public heads up. It's not been confirmed, but I may need to be in DC. So just
Happy early birthday, Chair
well, thank you very,
Jones.
very much. It's not one that I'm looking forward to, so thank you. Any other items from commissioners? None at this time? All right, well, with that, I will adjourn this meeting. We will adjourn to a regularly scheduled meeting on Thursday, May 2nd at 6:30 PM here. Thank you very much for coming out this evening.
I want to celebrate my birthday.